Hello, everyone. I am Brady Bridges, and I'm the broker and owner of Reside Real Estate here in Fort Worth, Texas. I want to welcome you to another episode of Real Talk with Reside Real Estate. We are a top producing team here in Fort Worth, Texas, and we want this podcast to be a resource for anyone looking to learn more about real estate and the great city of Fort Worth, Texas. Welcome to another episode of Real Talk with Reside Real Estate. Today I've got Jayson Nag. He is a native of Fort Worth, and he founded the Nag Law Firm in May of 2012, shortly after graduating law school and passing the Texas bar exam. He is a graduate of Texas Wesleyan University and Texas Wesleyan University School of Law. Jayson has a proven track record of success in a variety of family law matters. He is committed to providing his clients with the best possible legal representation and is passionate about helping families through difficult times. Jayson, thanks for coming in.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Brady. I appreciate it.
So one of the main reasons I wanted to have you come in today is, as real estate agents, we run into a lot of different situations. And although we fill in contracts, we're told not to be attorneys. So one of the hot topics we've been running into a lot lately has been a lot of divorce clients and some probate. So I appreciate you coming in. Can you kind of just expand on, how you got into law and kind of your background?
Sure. So I graduated law school in 2011, and I worked for a medium-sized firm practicing criminal defense and family law for about a year after I got licensed. And then, as they say, I decided to hang up my own shingle in 2012. And so we're 10 years into it now, and we're a boutique family law firm. Principal office here in Fort Worth. We represent clients all over North Texas, but primarily here in Tarrant County. And we handle everything from simple, agreed, uncontested divorces to high net worth, complex litigation divorces, and kind of everything in between. And we can help the clients from their initial consultation all the way through filing paperwork, settlement negotiations, mediation, and into litigation and trial if necessary.
Sure.
And so I started my practice, with a passion for advocating on behalf of my clients, and I feel like we do that very well.
That's great. It's fun when you find a job that you can truly make an impact. Like you're helping people, but you can make an impact in people's lives through difficult times, which I know I didn't mention it, but you also do some defense work as too.
We do. We definitely have a lot of criminal defense clients as well. And, unfortunately, people come to us when they're either they've made a mistake or, they're going through a divorce, not the best time in their lives. And, we have a lot of clients who are going through criminal cases and divorce cases because sometimes they unfortunately go hand in hand. Yeah.
So, you got your law degree, now you're practicing. How did you decide, or was there, like going through school, how did you decide to lean towards this type of practice?
It was just kind of something I fell into. Like I said, I worked for a medium-sized firm, kind of doing the same thing my first year.
Okay.
And realized that I liked it and that I could have an effect on people's lives as opposed to, doing transactional work or business litigation. I like working for people and kind of learning their story and finding out how I can help them, and that's the most rewarding part of what I do.
Awesome. Yeah. That's great. So, like I just said, we've been dealing with a lot of divorce cases lately. So one of the reasons I want to bring you in that worst case scenario, what are some of the factors that need to be considered when you're going through these, this unfortunate thing of what you need to do and what if you need to sell the property or how to go about those first steps?
Yeah, sure. Before I even talk about that, whenever somebody comes into my office for a consultation about divorce, I always tell every person who comes in, if there's any expectation of reconciliation, that's something that you got to at least try before you go down that road. Yeah, because what you don't want to do is spend a whole bunch of time and money on legal fees and then end up reconciling later on. And things like couples counseling, marriage counseling. I can't tell you how many people come in for a consult and I give them this advice and they go out and they do some sort of marriage counseling. And a lot of times that fixes the problem. But going back to the property issue, if you are in the unfortunate circumstance of going through the divorce, the first thing you need to do obviously is talk to a lawyer. People nowadays kind of have a penchant for going on Google and getting their legal advice, which is fine in some circumstances. But a circumstance like divorce, I would not advise anything like that. You need to talk to a licensed attorney, who practices family law, who knows what they're talking about. In Texas, what people have to remember is that the general rule is everything that you acquire, assets, debts, and liabilities during the marriage, they're going to be presumed to be community property, and they're going to be presumed to be split 50-50 upon the finalization of the divorce. When we're talking about houses specifically, most of the divorces that we deal with, the house is going to be community property because it was bought during the marriage. Mm-hmm. And so, a good lawyer is going to be able to kind of help you navigate, the pitfalls of selling the house, getting it appraised, making sure that, you're protected with the closing, the title company, and all that stuff.
Okay. Yeah, it's just interesting. Obviously no one goes into a marriage hoping for that situation. And then this comes and it just rocks both parties. The last few listings I've had that this has been the situation, it seems like everybody gets on the same page in the beginning. Then as it really starts to happen, they really start to butt heads.
Yeah, absolutely.
So kind of going into that, if you actually are in the situation, what are some of the things that are typically one of the biggest challenges for you and for the clients when they're trying to figure out what to do?
Yeah, so for the client, really the first thing when it comes to deciding what's going to happen with the house is deciding if someone's going to keep the house. Normally one of the spouses wants to stay in the house, and then the questions become, okay, can that spouse afford to pay the mortgage? Can they afford to pay all the utilities and the bills associated with it? As well as if that spouse stays in the house and keeps it after the divorce, are they creditworthy enough to refinance it in their own name? Because that's something that'll have to happen in order to take the other spouse off of that mortgage.
It's actually I think a lot of people don't think about.
Yeah, and
especially if you're getting into higher net worth stuff,
correct.
Right?
Yeah,
somebody might want to just one of the parties might stay at home or not have a job for a while,
and that happens a lot. We see a lot of stay-at-home moms who have stayed at home for long periods of time to raise kids, and they start that divorce process and they don't have the means to stay in the house. So if the spouses can't agree on who's going to stay in the house, then unfortunately the court will have no choice but to sell the house, mm-hmm. Which is very unfortunate.
So what does that timeline look like?
Yeah. So, on average, here in Tarrant County, a divorce can last anywhere from...
And let me go back. I told you before we got on here about there's been a lot of situations where both parties have agreed before the actual process has started. Mm-hmm. Is that something you guys, when you're going through that consultation in the beginning, is that something you advise for them to try to do?
Yes.
If they know what's going to happen, is to do that outside of having to go through that whole piece?
Yeah. Yeah, so we're a litigation firm, but we always advise against litigation, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Because it's always better in these situations to come to an agreement. If that's by way of an informal agreement between the parties, or if that's through mediation, it's always better for the client and really for the attorneys if both parties can just get an agreement done.
Yeah.
People save time, they save a lot of money in legal fees if they can just kind of play nice and come to an agreement.
Well, I'm sure if you're already if that's already broken, the marriage is already broken, mm-hmm. if you can find a common point for them to work together on something, it probably makes the rest of the whole process for you guys easier, right?
It does, yeah.
But let's say worst case, they can't agree, mm-hmm. then lead back.
Yeah, and then we get into litigation. Typically if you're litigating a divorce case, it's going to take anywhere from, 6 months on the very low end to maybe a couple years, and no one wants to be stuck in a court case for 2 years.
No.
And that's why, we always advise, let's see if we can settle, let's see if we can negotiate, let's go to mediation, because everybody comes out better on the other side.
Okay. So in that situation, if they can't agree and obviously they're split, how do y'all put things in place of who's paying the bills, or how are those items getting covered because I'm sure they're not going to be together?
Yeah. So normally the process goes, the divorce petition is filed, and then normally in about 30 days or so, you're going to get what's called temporary orders. And temporary orders are basically things such as, okay, husband's going to pay the mortgage and the bills. Wife's going to pay, the car note, et cetera, et cetera. Everything will get apportioned, and those temporary orders will stay in place until the divorce is finalized.
Okay.
And so a lot of times, if the divorce is dragging on for several months or, over a year, you're operating under those temporary orders the whole time.
Yeah, that's good. Otherwise, it'd be just constant
Mayhem.
Wild West fighting.
Yeah.
So obviously, like, this isn't a world that I live in all the time. You see it every day. What are you seeing are the biggest mistakes you're seeing people are making related to those types of sales?
Yeah. So the one thing I've been seeing here recently, it's a good and a bad thing. It's a good thing because, we're in DFW and we've got a really, really good housing market.
Yeah.
But what I've been seeing over the last couple of years, at least ever since COVID, is that people are kind of undervaluing what their house is actually worth. They're going to, Zillow or Realtor.com, and they're seeing their houses, worth $500,000. When
some of that might be intentional in that.
Yeah, exactly. Because if you're the spouse, who is the breadwinner, the majority, you're probably going to be the one paying out in the divorce. So you're going to try to undervalue that property as much as you can. But if you're a stay-at-home wife, right, you don't have any source of income and you're trying to sell the house, obviously you want the biggest number you can get. So yeah, one of the things I've been seeing is people, not really knowing what the true value of their house is. And my advice is, throw down the $400, hire an independent appraiser to come out and tell you exactly what the house could fetch on the open market.
Yeah, I can't tell you how many calls I've gotten where, we have a lot of reviews on Google. Somebody will call and say, my wife had this person come out and we're splitting up and she says it's worth this. I don't think it is because he wants to buy it and stay in it. Yeah. So I definitely agree with that one.
And I'll say to that end, you always need to have an appraiser come out and tell you what their recommendation is going to be, because the worst case scenario is if the spouses can't agree to sell the house at an agreed upon price, then the court will have no choice but to put the house in the hands of what's called a receiver. And the receiver will have the legal authority to sell the house at whatever price they deem is reasonable. And
Really?
Sometimes that's less than what the person thought they were going to get.
So is a receiver just somebody within the court system?
They'll be a licensed attorney. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Who is familiar with real estate here in Terry County.
So how often does it get to that point?
Luckily it's kind of rare. But it's worst case scenario because, there could be, let's say the market crashes, and you lose $40,000 in equity.
Yeah.
Well, you're just kind of SOL at that point. Plus, the receiver is going to charge the parties $10,000-$20,000 for their services. You're going to pay that out of pocket. So yeah, it's just not a situation anybody should want to be in.
Is that on? So would they would go and hire an agent? The receiver would.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So you're paying them,
correct,
plus paying real estate commissions on top of
that. Yeah, and the parties don't really have any control over it anymore. The receiver has the legal authority to sell the house for whatever they deem is reasonable.
Wow.
Yeah.
I didn't know that.
Mm-hmm.
Did not know that. So I think everybody's always interested. Most of the cases I would assume that you guys are working are, obviously high net worth. They're not, you probably do some high net worth, right? But most of the cases are more common.
Yeah.
Middle of the road.
Sure.
So on those, is it a pretty simple process that people get along? And is it more of what I was talking about, people selling beforehand, or do you see most of them going to? And I guess it probably depends on what one spouse did to the other.
That's also true. What we normally see is people, hire us, we file all the paperwork, and then sometime during the pendency of the case, the house is sold.
Okay.
And that's by agreement between the parties. And that's really the ideal situation. Obviously property is what it is, right? It's a game of numbers.
Yeah.
When you get into divorces with children and talking about custody and visitation, obviously that's a lot messier, and that's outside of this discussion. But traditionally, if it's just an estate worth, let's say $250,000, and we're just dealing with property, it's normally a pretty easy process.
Okay. So obviously you know exactly what to do whenever a client comes to you in this situation. What advice would you give to real estate agents or brokers who are approached in these type of situations early on, and we can't really advise their clients, but
how would you direct them as an agent when they're starting that process?
Yeah, I think, the most important thing is maintaining communication with the party's lawyer. And, we're able to talk to third parties such as real estate agents as long as we get consent from the client. And a lot of times, a quick phone call with the lawyer, hey, how long do you think this is going to take? What's the timeline? What do you think the chances are that, the soon-to-be X is going to agree to sell the house at, X amount of dollars? A lot of times that'll, I think, help the real estate agent understand what the timeline is going to be. And obviously y'all can kind of set up, your process kind of contingent upon how the court case is going to go, because obviously that comes first.
Yeah.
And it's kind of unfortunate for you guys, but most attorneys are, they're nice enough to jump on a phone call for 5-10 minutes and kind of explain the process.
Sure.
Yeah.
One question I had, so I've seen some cases where it has been, a husband who was a primary breadwinner, a wife, they're going to split, but then he wants to help buy her a house before the actual divorce is done. Are you able to do that, or is that it's still community property at that point, right? How does...
Yeah, there are some workarounds that we can do, such as a postmarital agreement that could essentially confirm that new property as the wife's separate property going forward. But it could potentially, raise some red flags with the court. So I would, that's not something we normally traditionally would advise, the client to do. If it's after the divorce, it's no problem, right? Because that can be construed as a gift. But yeah, I mean, generally, if husband wanted to buy wife her own house during the marriage, it would still be half of his, unless we had the proper, legal documentation in place.
So how, we're talking primary residence. What happens whenever you get multiple properties involved, or, companies, right? If somebody had started a real estate company with rental holdings, is there any different impact on going through this process of separating that out as an entity, as its own entity?
Yeah. Obviously it's gonna lengthen the time.
But it's still all community property.
As long as it was created during the marriage. Yeah, it's presumed to be community property. And, in every divorce where there's property division, the clients are going to have to fill out what's called an inventory and appraisement, and it's a full snapshot of all the assets they have, all the debts, all the liabilities. And the job of the lawyer is to kind of go through the inventory for their client as well as the opposing client and come up with what that total number is for the valuation of the estate, right? Because it's presumed to be cut down the middle 50-50. And that all sounds well and good and easy, and in most cases it is. But when you run into multiple properties, businesses, retirement accounts, 401ks, all those things, then it becomes a lot more complex, because you have to divide all these things equally, but you can't cut a house in half, right?
Well, and as you know, you see it a lot, but people with high net worth, they tend to put their money to work more than they do keep it liquid, right? So it's stuff that's not easily accessible cash right away.
Exactly. Yeah. A lot of these folks are not liquid. Yeah, you're exactly right.
So what's kind of the craziest case you've worked on? I mean, I know you probably can't share a ton of details, but I feel like everybody when they hear about, divorce is not a good thing, but everybody hears about these big cases, right? That's the ones they want to hear about, is like the Bill Gates or Jeff Bezos type cases.
Yeah. I'll tell you the craziest.
Well, the craziest thing you've seen during a case.
Yeah, the craziest case I've had was actually a criminal defense case. It's actually a murder case here a few years ago. I'm not going to go into those specifics. I will say, on the family side, we do see a lot of crazy things. Unfortunately, a lot of adultery. A lot of hiding of assets. Man, I can't tell you how many cases I've had where we've gone through the discovery process and we've had, our client come to us and say, I can't believe that he or she was hiding, $500,000 from me. They just never, it's funny how some people just don't realize like what their spouse is doing during the marriage, and obviously that's an extreme, but I've seen it. It's been more common in the last few years, I think.
Yeah.
I don't know why that is, but
Well, do you think COVID had any spur in that? Well, being at home around each other?
our business definitely, our family law business definitely skyrocketed in starting about April of 2020. Yeah, because people were stuck in their house with their significant other, and a lot of people didn't like it, which is unfortunate. But
So any kind of last tips that you give anybody that's either thinking of starting that process, unfortunately, or maybe going through it?
yeah,
Advice either to, I think what you said earlier was great about try reconciliation if that's the idea, but any last kind of final tips that you have?
yeah, obviously go and consult with a licensed lawyer. You want to consult with a lawyer who obviously practices family law, who has a lot of experience with divorces in that county. I would never hire an out-of-county attorney in Terry County. Just as if you're in Hood County, you probably want to hire a Hood County attorney because
Really?
yeah, attorneys, you have relationships and bonds that you build with the judges in your own county, and that does go a long way. And so I would highly advise that if people have to go through this situation, that they stay local, and they find somebody who's reputable and who has experience in that field. And then additionally, like I said before, making sure that you're not undervaluing what your house is worth. For a lot of people, it's they want to kind of rush through it, and they want to sell the house, they want to get divorced as quickly as possible, but you never want to leave money on the table either.
Sure.
So find yourself a good lawyer, find yourself a good independent appraiser to come out and tell you what your house is worth.
So finding a good lawyer, right? If you're clueless to this, how would you tell people to go and find what constitutes finding a good attorney?
Yeah. So couple things. Obviously, a Google search is a good start. You can Google my name, and my website's the first thing to pop up. All of our Google reviews are going to pop up. You need to go through and you need to read those reviews, because a lot of those reviews will tell you a lot about that law firm that you're vetting. Combined with ask your friends, ask your family. Virtually everybody knows somebody, who can refer you to a good lawyer.
Yeah.
So I think those two things will, you'll end up finding who you need to go to.
Awesome. So one thing I've asked everybody if they come in is, what do you love about Fort Worth? So you were born and raised here, is that right?
Actually, I was born in New Jersey,
Okay.
but my family moved down to Texas when I was 7, and I've been in Fort Worth ever since. And
So yeah,
I'm a Texas. I'm a Fort Worth.
You're a Fort Worth
Yeah,
guy.
yeah, for sure.
So what do you love about living in Fort Worth? You've obviously seen a ton of change.
Yeah.
6, 7 years old.
Gosh, yeah. I mean, I went to high school in the Keller, North Fort Worth area at
Okay.
Folsom Ridge High School, and when I was there, there was nothing there but fields. And now when I drive by, it's insane. There's so much commerce down there, and it's fantastic. About myself, I've been, like I said, I've been in Fort Worth basically since 1990. Got married to my wonderful wife in 2013. She's actually from Mesquite.
Okay.
But she was living here after law school, and her and I bought a house after we got married. I live in the Mistletoe Heights neighborhood, which absolutely love. And we bought a house that was built in 1922, and we renovated it a couple times, and it's probably going to be the house that we die in.
Yeah.
My wife's a lawyer as well. She doesn't practice anymore. She actually retired back in 2018. We bought a yoga studio, which is now Soul Sweat Hot Yoga Studio, off of 8th and Rosedale. And my wife also happens to be the yoga instructor for the Dallas Cowboys. And so when she got that gig, she retired. She was working at the DA's office for about 15 years and retired there in 2018. Yeah. And now she's yoga, every day, all day. And but yeah, going back to Fort Worth, our yoga studio is right there in the heart of near South Side. And that's my favorite place, man. The whole Magnolia corridor, all the restaurants and the nightlife down there. Yeah. You just can't beat it.
Well, it's amazing. I mean, like you said, Keller, I had a friend there in TCU. He was from Keller. We drove up there. There was nothing. And now it's just,
yeah.
I mean, you can't,
Amazing.
it's continuous from Fort Worth to Keller area.
Yeah, the whole Alliance area.
And then like South Main, I would have never imagined it would be what it is now.
Yeah.
Back when I was in school, you didn't drive over there.
Exactly. And I mean, especially, you know, for y'all's industry, like, you know, that's why people are moving down here and continue to move down here. You know?
We have some very talented, I've had a few there's some talented developers and some really, really good guys doing some great projects here in Fort Worth. And I think just on the real estate side for us, the national market, you see the news a lot of times and it looks like doom and gloom, but we're pretty insulated here in DFW with the number of people that are coming here. Just the demand is just continuing to grow and we have no inventory.
Yeah.
I mean, in your neighborhood alone, just Mistletoe Heights, there's nothing that ever pops up over there.
And if it does, it stays in the market for about a day.
Yeah, 10 minutes.
Yeah, pretty much.
Well, Jason, I really appreciate you coming in. I think this is very helpful. It's not a situation we like to run into very often, but I think it's a good resource to have for people to know what to do when they have to go through it.
Yeah, have me.
Well, this was another episode of Real Talk with Reside Real Estate. If I can be a resource of any ways, please reach out.